Hi, this is Ableton Certified Trainer Ben Murphy with a quick tutorial for Samplesound. Today we're going to talk all about the grid in your music making software and understand a little bit more about how these musical ideas are arranged and use that grid. So whilst we can think about the length of time of our song in minutes and seconds, once we start to break apart the parts that make up the song, we tend to start breaking things down into bars first off. So bars are just a different way to look at the length of time and the duration of parts inside of our music projects. So for example, in this simple project, I have a drum beat and it's currently running for 8 bars. You can see that it ends at the end of the 8th bar, right? Whilst we could say that it runs for like almost 15 seconds, that's not really as useful as looking at the bars, because the bars are a part of what organizes these musical ideas and sets up the grid upon which they are constructed. So if we look a little bit more closely at this musical part, we can see that it actually runs for 2 bars and then loops again. Have a listen to this drum beat. So what we have here, we might call a 2-bar loop, right? It's got 2 unique bars that just repeats 4 times in total. So we have 8 bars worth of drums on the timeline here, but it's a 2-bar long loop before it makes 3 more repeats there. Another way we could refer to the length of this loop is a phrase, right? A phrase is a musical idea which typically loops or concludes after a number of bars. So this is a 2-bar long phrase, right? If we want to start understanding a little bit more about this particular drum pattern and how it uses the grid, we're going to have to start breaking things down a bit smaller. Having a look in my clip view down here, you can see that that also has a ruler across the top, which is outlining the bars and beats. And beats is in fact the next level down that we're going to start taking a look at. So each bar is constructed of 4 beats. And you can see that marked on the ruler across the top here, as that is the first beat, which is displayed with a whole number just so it stands out clearly visually. And then we get 1.2, that's the first bar and the second beat, 1.3, first bar, third beat, 1.4, first bar, fourth beat, and then we begin the second bar, right? Another easy way to hear the beats is if we turn on the metronome. The metronome is going to count out the beats, 4 to each bar. I'll turn the drum beat up and down while it's playing so you can hear the metronome clearly outlining a count of 4 with a higher pitch noise on the first of every 4. Okay, so it's important to note that I have 4 beats in the bar because I am using a time signature of 4/4. That's set in my project up here. Now, time signatures are a bit of a bigger concept than we can get into in this video, but if you're writing contemporary music in a Western culture, then you're probably writing 4/4 music as well, especially if you're writing dance music styles. So if we look at our drum pattern, and we look at where those 4 beats to every bar are being marked, we can see that first of all, there are kick drums or bass drums on every one of those beats. There's an extra one over here, but there is no beat in either of these 2 bars that doesn't have a kick drum on it. And that's pretty typical for dance music kind of styles. It helps really clearly outline the pulse and outline the beats, and it's good to dance to. So that tells us where our kick drums are placed. They're on every beat, with one extra exception, but we'll come back to that, right? But if I want to learn about some of the other sounds that are in use here, like say the hi-hats, well, they're living somewhere in between the beats. And so we're going to have to start breaking things down even further. For this, we're going to use subdivisions. Subdivisions are one of the ways in which we can break apart the bar into smaller portions. like a lot of things in music, there are other terms for this depending upon what kind of music you're making or how you learned music. But most often in software, you will see subdivisions displayed something like a fraction. In fact, my grid is currently displaying 16ths, right? That means 16 subdivisions to a bar. And so there are currently 16 grid lines across the length of every bar. Now I can change my grid display and change the number of subdivisions per bar that we are looking at by right-clicking in the empty space. And let's go up to quarter notes. Okay, so quarter notes will show us the beats. So it's fair to say that we have 4 beats to a bar. And we could also say we have 4 quarter notes to a bar. And in my case, there are kick drums on every quarter note, right? But the hi-hats are on a sort of smaller space than that, right? We're going to have to start breaking down to a smaller subdivision to figure out where they land. So again, I'll right-click in the empty space and let's go to eighths. So when I'm looking at eighth notes, you can see that hi-hats are landing on every second eighth note, right? Or halfway between every beat. And this is pretty typical for a kind of house or techno music style pattern. Have a listen again, and you'll hear the sort of bouncing interplay between kicks and hi-hats. All right, but what about some of these other notes we've got landing in other spaces in that second bar? They're really cool. They help kind of give the second bar a bit of extra sort of bounce and momentum. Well, they're obviously in sort of a finer space as well. We're going to have to break our grid down even further. So if we right-click in the empty space, we can go back down to 16ths, and sure enough, that's where that kick drum lies there, and that's where that snare lies over there on the 16th note grid, right? So if we subdivide our bars all the way down into 16ths, we can start to access rhythmic places that allow us that kind of detail. But of course, we could go even further, right? What about 30 seconds? Now there's 32 subdivisions to every bar. What could we do with 30 seconds? Well, let's throw some 30 seconds in here and let's just kind of see how that sounds. I guess we'll just fill out a few more. And now we've got something that sounds like this. So as we subdivide the bar down into smaller and smaller subdivisions, we can make even more intricate patterns. Depending on what kind of style of music you're trying to make, you may or may not need to go down to 30 seconds. Or you may not put kick drums on every quarter note. These are all just different creative ideas of how you use that space. But first and most importantly today, we've learned a little bit more about how to think about the arrangement of these ideas and how they relate to our grid. Remember that we start with a grid that is made up of a number of bars, and then on that grid, we're putting in different sort of musical patterns. These musical patterns are often loops, and those are made up of multiple numbers of bars, so it might be a 1-bar loop or a 2-bar loop. We could also refer to this as a phrase, right? We have here a 2-bar long phrase or a 2-bar long loop. And then as we look inside that particular pattern, we can break down the bar into even smaller subdivisions. We've got 4 beats to every bar, also known as our quarter notes, but we can break down into 8th notes, 16th notes, and 32nd notes, and each one of those just creates even more subdivisions of the bar to give us a finer and finer grid to arrange our musical ideas.